After going through the 3 C's, costs, competition, and customers, we're finally at the stage to look at willingness to pay. Willingness to pay is directly associated with the prices businesses charge in the market. So first, what is willingness to pay? So willingness to pay is the maximum price that a customer is willing to pay for a product. If we price above willingness to pay, by definition, the customer will not buy the product. If we price below the willingness to pay, customers would buy the product happily. But the business will be leaving money on the table, charging a price that is below what the business could have charged in the market. In today's discussion, we'll examine 3 topics. First, factors that affect willingness to pay. Second, how do we use information on willingness to pay? And third, how do we collect information on willingness to pay? First, let me use a few examples to explain the factors affecting willingness to pay. Our first discussion is on a topic that we're all familiar with in Houston. Because of our tropical location, we experience a lot of hurricanes. So my question for you is, why does Walmart always run out of bottled water when hurricane comes? On a first thought, the question may seem dumb, because to prepare for hurricanes, people rush to big box stores to stock up water in case of water shortage. But the answer is less obvious than that. We all know that in the market, things are decided by 2 sides. It's not just consumer demand that matters. There's also a supply side. So, for retailers to run out of bottled water, there must be a mismatch between supply and demand. Therefore, it's not just that demand has gone up. It is also that supply is not meeting demand. With the weather forecasting technology nowadays, we get a hurricane warning 72 hours before it ever comes. For a big retail chain like Walmart, 3 days is a lot of time to stock up products. Then why water still goes out of stock every time? To think deeper about the problem, we have to consider what could retailers do to prevent overstock. There are usually 2 ways. One is to put a limit on how much water people can buy. A second is to raise the price. Here, raising price is a fair and appealing option for retailers because disrupting supply chain to stock up water usually means higher costs. But why do retailers not increase their price during hurricanes? As we can all imagine that people will be very angry and it will be terrible PR. It's generally not worth it for retailers to do it. Several years ago, there was a hurricane and the generators are out of stock at a local Home Depot. So one of these Home Depot stores, it actually stocked up generators by moving generators from neighboring cities. But moving generators is costly, so Home Depot raised the price. But people were angry at such behavior after reports of price gouging, so Home Depot at the end of the day had to refund the customers. This is what we call a fairness effect. Usually customers have a perception on what price is fair. And when that perception comes into play, it will generally bring down the willingness to pay, even though people need water. The second example we examine comes from drugstores like CVS. When you walk into the aisle of painkillers, you'll notice that painkillers are stacked up together, and they belong to 2 general categories, national brands and store brands. And often, the store brands, such as CVS Pain Relief, is stocked right next to the national brands, such as Tylenol. And the reason why drugstores put them together next to each other is because having a low price substitute placed right next to the national brands enhances consumers' willingness to pay. If you pay attention to the fine prints on these painkillers, you will notice that the store brand actually has the same amount of active ingredients as the national brands. There has been research showing that pharmacists purchase store brands far more often than national brands. Putting store brands next to national brands in order to enhance willingness to pay is called a positioning effect. Here's a question for the wine drinkers. How do you choose your wine? There's no objective measurements for the quality of wine except for price. So very often, From novices to experts, when they choose wine, they use price as a major clue on which wine is better. This is what we call a price quality effect. That is, the price itself may be signaling quality. Interestingly, there has been blind tests on wine drinking. They put the same wine in bottles with different labels. Some labels are expensive, some are not. And it's the same wine. When they put the same wine out of different bottles and ask a bunch of experts to rate which wine is better, you guessed it right. The experts overwhelmingly rate the more expensive wine far better, although they have been drinking exactly the same wine. Next, let me show you some tools and batteries. So on the left, you see the combo tools with batteries, a charger, and a bag for $130. And on the right, you see only the two batteries included in the combo for $70. Which one of these two seems a better deal for you? Given choices, most people would take the combo because comparing the two batteries, it's a hell of a deal. Why do we observe such weird price comparisons? Why are batteries so expensive? Well, the way to think about it is, again, back to segmentation. What kind of people buy combos and what kind of people buy batteries? People without tools buy combos, and these people would have choices for different brands. People already with tools would buy batteries. And let me show you some batteries. When you look at Makita, Black & Decker, Bosch, DeWalt, and Ryobi, what do you see in these batteries? None of these batteries are compatible with each other. So back to our discussion on combos versus batteries. Combo buyers have choices of alternative products. Battery buyers usually already have the tools of this brand. They are tied up, therefore their willingness to pay would be higher. We call this effect the switching cost effect. That is, if you already own Milwaukee tools, it's very costly to switch to other tool brands. So your willingness to pay to Milwaukee batteries will be higher. Okay, my next question is a little bit tricky. On the left-hand side, I have a table that has listed a bunch of healthcare plans. So they are of different types and they are of different costs for self and self-family. Given their type, their coverages are also different. Pause the video and select a healthcare plan optimal for you and your family. Well, I'm just kidding. So as you can see, it is extremely difficult to make a selection here. And this is a very commonly used trick to manipulate willingness to pay. This is what we call a difficult comparison effect. For certain businesses, they make direct price comparison or even product comparisons extremely difficult. As a result, people usually give up making price comparisons out of frustration. Their willingness to pay actually goes higher. On this slide, I've shown two different products, and I want to ask you, how would you respond to a price discount? On the left-hand side is bathroom tissues. On the right-hand side are yogurts. So these two products offer an extreme comparison in terms of product usage and perishability. Bathroom tissues never expire. People can actually stock them up. And yogurts are perishable. If you stock up yogurts, you have to consume faster. If you stock up bathroom tissues, you cannot consume faster. Well, you can, but. So comparing these two products, people would respond to price discounts very differently. For bathroom tissues, people's price sensitivity is heavily decided by how much inventory they have. This is what we call an inventory effect. To recap the factors affecting actual willingness to pay, we have discussed fairness effect, why water runs out during a hurricane, positioning effect, putting store brands next to national brands, price quality effects. When purchasing wine, people use price as a clue to infer quality. When it's costly to switch away from a product, willingness to pay usually goes higher. Difficult comparison effects. Different medical insurance plans are extremely difficult to compare. As a result, people's willingness to pay goes higher because it's impossible to compare different options. And the inventory effect. Willingness to pay is lower in the short run when customers hold inventories and believe that the current price is just temporarily higher, so they can wait for deals. Next, we examine how we can use the willingness to pay information. On this slide, I'm showing you 10 customers, customer 1 through customer 10. And we have the willingness to pay for each customer. For example, customer 1's willingness to pay is $20, customer 2's willingness to pay is $18, etc. So we have the willingness to pay number in decreasing order of all the 10 customers. So how do we make use of this information? I'm going to draw a graph to show the relationship between price, if you charge the product at different price levels, and demand, how many of these customers are going to purchase the product. The definition for willingness to pay is the maximum amount of money that a customer is willing to pay for the product. There are two dimensions, the horizontal axis and the vertical axis. The horizontal axis is price, and the vertical axis is the number of customers who would buy the products. First, when we price at $20, based on willingness to pay, only customer 1 would buy the products. So we have a demand of 1. At $18, the demand goes to 2, and then 16 goes to 3, and then at $12, we actually have 5 customers with willingness to pay higher than 12. And then $10 with 6, $8 with a demand of 7, $6 with a demand of 9, and finally at $4, the demand of 10. That's the total market. When we connect these dots, we get a staircase-shaped line that tracks how the demand shifts with price change. It's not a continuous straight line because we have a small market of 10 customers. If we use a straight line going across these dots, we get a rough line that is the demand curve that we have been talking about. So willingness to pay information gives us the demand curve. A second use of willingness to pay information is to figure out which product will the customer choose. Here I give you 3 products, product A, product B, and product C. For each product, we know the willingness to pay of the customers at $200, $180, and $178. And we also know the prices of each of the products. So which product will the customer choose? For this comparison, we introduce a useful concept. It's called a surplus or utility. It is equal to the willingness to pay for the product minus the price of the product. So what this formula defines is basically the higher the surplus, the happier the customer is. Because the concept of surplus is the comparison between willingness to pay and the price. Imagine you're willing to pay $10,000 for a product and it sells only $100. You'll be very happy because you get such a super deal. So that's what surplus represents, the difference between willingness to pay and the price. Pause the video and apply this formula to calculate the surplus for each one of the products. For product A, the surplus is 200 minus 190 is equal to $10. For product B, the surplus is $19. And for product C, the surplus is $20. So 20 is the largest surplus. Therefore, out of products A, B, and C, the customer would choose product C. So far, we have established that willingness to pay information is very useful. It can tell us the demand curve. It can tell us which products would customers choose in the market. So how do we get this willingness to pay information? In this table, I give you a brief overview of how we get willingness to pay information under different conditions. We're looking at 2 dimensions. First, whether you are improving the existing pricing or you are pricing for the first time. Second, whether we are measuring the willingness to pay using an uncontrolled environment, or are we using an experimental condition? On the top left corner, when we are improving existing pricing in an uncontrolled environment, usually we rely on historical sales data. There are two types of historical sales data. One type of data is called a scanner data. This is the type of data where we know the sales of each product on each day, but we do not know who are the customers that purchased the product. So this data is at the store level. A second type of data is what we call panel data. For panel data, we actually know who has bought what. So this is kind of like if you go to Kroger and you scan your membership card, Kroger actually records who you are and the kind of products you have purchased. So scanner data is easier to get from a store's perspective, and panel data is more accurate in measuring individual selections. With historical data, usually you can figure out the relationship between price levels and demand. For example, if you are selling a product, let's say a razor, and the price of the razor varies, so it goes up or down over time. And with this historical data, you'll see that at different price levels, demand differs. The second kind of condition for improving existing pricing in an experimental situation is what we call field tests. In a field test, we usually put the products directly into the market. Most commonly, this happens in test markets in places that are relatively isolated from big cities so that the companies can actually control advertising as well as pricing to see customer responses. Field tests are fairly accurate, but they are also very expensive comparing to using historical sales data. So for pricing for the first time, there are two different general ways. One is to use surveys. The other is what we call a conjoint analysis. I'm going to give you a brief example of both ways. In a pricing survey, we usually would include a question like this. Would you buy the course notebook if its price were $12.50? And the choice is yes or no. So in this survey, you put only one price for each respondent. Let's say you want to summarize the percentage of people who said yes to $12.50. And then for another group of people, you use $10 instead of $12.50. And then you examine the percentage of people who said yes at $10. And then it goes on and on. So you examine multiple price points across different groups of people. The advantage of a survey method like this is this actually usually works. The disadvantage of this is it actually requires a very large number of people in order to cover the full price range. Here I have listed 8 different price levels. Let's say you need 100 people on each price level in order to get reliable results. Then 8 different price levels means you need 800 people to answer this question to get reasonable results. That's a lot of people. The general issues with pricing surveys is sometimes customers may deliberately understate their willingness to pay. So people have no reason to tell you their actual willingness to pay. And second, customers may say a price that reflects how they want the person conducting the survey to view them, but does not reflect their actual willingness to pay. So in this case, it's tricky because their response could be either higher or lower than their actual willingness to pay, depending on what customers think they want to achieve. And the third problem that is more common in a general survey method, by directly asking customers how much maximum are you willing to pay for this product, that usually doesn't work because other than they don't want to tell you, they may be simply not sure about their willingness to pay. And briefly, here's the method that is kind of state of art in marketing when we try to extract willingness to pay information. This is what we call a conjoint analysis. And in a conjoint analysis, we show each respondent a few products. In this case, we show them 2 products. And you have 2 different iPhones with different specifications. And one of these attributes is the price. For iPhone 11 Pro at $999, for iPhone 11 at $699. And then we just ask the customer, which one would you prefer? So this imitates a fairly natural market condition when people make choices. And hidden in this choice is their willingness to pay information. So in content analysis, we ask people a series of choices on many different phones, and then we analyze these choices on which ones are chosen, and then we figure out the willingness to pay on each one of the attributes. That's our discussion on willingness to pay. Thank you. I'll see you next time.